All right, everybody. Hi, welcome. Another episode of Money Talks Love Listens. I just want to give a shout out to all those in Texas. I know that a lot of people right now don't have power. A few friends of mine are completely in the dark and have been for the whole day. So our prayers are with you. If you can tell, I am not in my normal setting. I am not in Florida. It is very cold here, and it's cold. Jim, is it cold where you are? So we are going to go ahead and get started. Our guest today is Andrea Lowe from Toronto. Hi, Andrea.
Hello, everybody.
Hi. And always my wonderful co-host is Jim. Hi, Jim.
Hello.
How are you dealing with the snow?
We're battling through it. Hopefully, we are at the tail end of this frigid polar vortex by tomorrow. Hopefully.
I hope so. I don't want to shovel anything else.
I hear you.
But yeah, it's not as bad as it could be. So, Andrea, please kind of give us an overview of, kind of how you got started as a dating coach, as well as, more about your company. I always like to let the guests kind of tell their story. I did a little research on you, but I try not to snoop because I like things to be organic. So I am learning as well as our audience. So please share more about yourself, Andrea.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you for having me as part of the show today. I'm super excited to be on this. So yeah, I'm Andrea. I'm from Toronto, and this is where my business is based. So I actually have a business and marketing background, ton of experience running marketing campaigns and planning events. So that's my background. And I actually had this idea to start Toronto Dating Hub 2 years ago. And lo and behold, in the midst of a pandemic last year, I decided to actually bring this idea to life in the middle of a pandemic because I thought, hey, you know what? There's still singles, there's still lonely people. And in the middle of like social isolation, I was like, okay, this is now more than ever when I need to make this happen. And so I started Toronto Dating Hub. And so it started off in May of last year. And basically I run monthly events, most of which are virtual now over Zoom, but I did get a chance to run a few in-person events last year, partnering up with some local bars. But it's been really nice to partner with local businesses, whether they're fitness instructor, yoga instructors, to local bars to really promote that local support small businesses, and really helping each other out. And then connecting singles throughout the Greater Toronto area, because like I said, people are lonely, people are really eager to connect with other people out there. And so it's been really rewarding in that sense to bring together the singles community. So taking that marketing background and events planning and then really throwing it into this really niche community. So it's been really great.
Wonderful. And Toronto is one of my favorite cities. I've been to every single province, I think, of Canada. So I secretly say my soul is Canadian, even though I'm American. I would just like to be adopted by Canada. If anybody wants to adopt me, that'd be great. But I guess my first question, now that I hear you talk more about your business, and Jim kind of, I would like to hear some of your thoughts on this. How is it kind of starting a business during a pandemic? I think we've interviewed a lot of people that recently have started businesses or kind of geared, pushed off their business during the pandemic. How has that kind of, you talked a little bit about how you started, but how has that been like versus maybe if you had to start it, I don't know, 2 years ago? And actually now a lot of people are pivoting, into digital schools versus you were like, well, I don't have any other option. We have to do virtual.
Yeah. I mean, in the beginning of the pandemic, luckily, because I wasn't marketing events, like all the events stopped, right? So then I had a bit of extra time on my hands to really plan and research and all that. And with virtual events, I mean, especially let's say Zoom, like really my cost to entry is pretty low.
Right.
And then looking at my competitors, I mean, like I'm not the first person to do this, but definitely just doing some research and seeing, you know what, it's not saturated. So it's definitely something that I can get started in.
Right.
And then of course, online, you know, with technology, there's so many Facebook groups and meetup groups and so many resources online for you to, you know, bounce ideas off other entrepreneurs or startups. And, you know, one of the best feedback really was just, Andrea, what are you waiting for? Like, just get started. You know, the best way to learn is just try it. If it fails, it fails. Like, you don't really have a lot to lose. And so I really just went with it. And then now that I'm in this space, I actually help moderate a Facebook group. It's called Toronto Entrepreneurs and Startups. It's now up to 6,000 members. And again, every day, like, people do posts and it's motivating, but you're also, you know, surround yourself with really smart people who are doing the same thing, or maybe they're a little bit ahead of you and they can sort of help guide you. But it's I just learned that it's such a supportive group of entrepreneurs and business owners out there. So it's never been a better time to actually sort of get started.
Right. That's really amazing. I commend you for that. Jim, do you have any thoughts?
I do. Actually, that's well, Andrew, that's fantastic that you started your own practice in this. You know, it's interesting that you found a niche market with people that are thirsting for some interaction. You know, in my business, we thirst for the touch. We thirst for the face-to-face. The Zoom interaction was very difficult for us. So I'm a financial advisor, and all of my meetings are face-to-face. Well, they used to be. Over the last 20 some odd years, we were always face-to-face, and, you know, shaking hands and hugging and, you know, seeing your interaction, you know, in close proximity was the way we ran our businesses. So this was a big change. But I can tell you that for my practice, my clientele, they're thirsting for something new, thirsting for some other interaction. So I think you hit the nail on the head that you are transitioning to a business model that is never going to go away, because you can do it anywhere, and you're satisfying a group of people in most society that are looking for something. And you know, it's also, secondly, which is interesting, is that almost everyone that I've ever talked to that started a business last year during the pandemic, and they were like, oh my goodness, why do I do this? I don't know why, I don't know how, I'm scared. They've exploded, because there are people that have said, I'm going to wait. Since you didn't wait, you're ahead of the bell curve and starting out your practice. So this is awesome. So commend the heck out of it.
And actually, I just wanted to share about, like, you know, people are talking a lot about Zoom fatigue, right? And I'm sure both of you have been in meetings and all that. And so it's, again, for every sort of negative talk that you give yourself or that you hear, there's something that sort of contradicts it. And I found a way, like you said, I didn't wait, but I just started experimenting with how I can make these virtual events better. You know, I do polls and surveys after each event, and I really listen to my customers in terms of clients on what worked, what didn't work. And I just keep experimenting about, like you said, people are hungry for that touch, for that contact. And so it's figuring out what works, right? And then just keep experimenting.
I mean, Zoom fatigue is real. I mean, it's interesting. So what do you recommend to people that hit that plateau of Zoom fatigue? Like, what do you recommend for them to change it to make it a little lively?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, from hosting events, and it's funny because the other side of the dating events, I do professional networking. I'm actually hosting one tomorrow night, actually. And part of that is making sure, you know, you have great hosts and moderators that are, you know, fun and engaging. Again, you come up with icebreakers. And what I found, one of the things, even for entrepreneurs and business owners, they are tired of that Zoom fatigue. And so they're just looking to connect with people, like actual people, like less about like how business is going, because you have the 9 to 5 for that. And really it's just like what we're doing. It's just having real talk about like life, what's happening, and get real, like throw out F-bombs if you need to know that there are real people out there, and they're feeling the same thing as you, or, you know, letting your cat into the background or your kids screaming in the back. It's just, you know, creating that and then having fun. Like, I always come up with different games, again, different for different groups, like whether it's a dating event to professionals, and just coming up with fun icebreakers to, I usually do like a scavenger hunt where, let's say for anti-Valentine's Day, so fun for anti-Valentine's Day, I said, bring the thing that you've kept from a past relationship. People were like, what? some people try to say like, oh, I've burned everything that my ex gave me. And I'm like, no, like, I'm sure you have something you kept from an ex, right? Like that's a jewelry item, like a guy pulled out a watch, someone pulled out a keychain, whatever it is. I'm like, just find it. It's show and tell. Basically, that's how they introduce themselves. It's like, hi, I'm Andrea, and then this is my item, so that we get a piece of that, get to know that person on a more deeper level, which again, on normal dates or texting, you don't get that information that quickly. So it's a really interesting way to connect with people.
I love that. That is hilarious. Now I'm thinking of all the stuff that I have from like past texts. I'm like, I never gave that back, and I'm not giving it back. But you talked about, obviously virtual events, especially with dating events. I know just from the dating events that we've thrown, some people, when we first started, was like, why are you doing a virtual dating event? No one's going to come to a virtual dating event. And I was like, you're not going to have an option. There's not going to be any other option. And lo and behold, a few months later, there were no other options. So a lot of people, I think, at first were like, how's this going to work? How are people still going to date throughout the pandemic? What should people be really looking for in a partner during the pandemic?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I guess it depends on if you're looking for something serious or casual. So I'll go on the side of, looking for something more serious and long-term.
Yeah.
First thing, obviously, is being patient. I mean, pre-COVID, during COVID, that hasn't changed. And I hate to say something cliche, but it's a marathon, not a sprint. Be selective, right? And I've heard so many people saying that the pandemic has given them more time, right? And more space to really find out about people, learn about people, and learning about yourself, not just about other people, but about yourself. So I say being selective about focusing on the qualities that actually matter. Then, so not just about like looks, when we're looking at dating profiles, we're swiping away, but, it's not just about looks, right? Because you could swipe on a really good looking person, but maybe they're meeting tons of people in person and not being safe during COVID. I mean, that's not very good, right?
Or they're just boring.
Yes. And that's another big thing I found, are they a glass half full or half empty kind of person? Because during this time, you get some, either optimistic people like, oh yeah, I'm like learning a new skill. I've been focusing on my hobbies. I have more time to work out. And that's a positive thing. And then you have those people who are drags like, I hate this pandemic. I wish it would go away. I do nothing all day. And it's like, oh, like, do you really want to hang out with those kind of people? And so that's been really interesting. And of course, communication is huge. You want to be able to have a conversation now more than ever while people are like really like isolated. You want to know you can converse with this person. So whether that be texting, video calls, you want to make sure it's someone you can communicate with. And one of the biggest things, because there's a lot of ghosting or breadcrumbing and all these like terms and just bad things when people are now online and they can just hide behind text. I would say really focus on communication and frequency. I would say consistency of communication. I have this golden rule of thumb about 3 days. If there's 3 days of silence, bye-bye. Because it's just there's like, especially now more than ever, we're like, what are you busy doing? Like, are you going out? Because in Toronto, right, like we're just going through a province-wide lockdown, not even just like by city, province-wide lockdown. We're slowly easing up on that. But for like a month and a half, we're on province-wide lockdown. So if you're really busy, like what are you busy doing that you can't answer me for 3 days? Like that's my golden rule. 3 days of silence and you're out. Because like I just don't know what you could possibly say that's like you're so busy you couldn't answer a text, right? Like it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I would say, is the COVID talk. You know how you have like the sex talk usually, but it's the COVID talk. I think it's really important that people don't really talk about this or they're like taboo to talk about this, but it's super important. Like it's life or death really. If someone's like making you feel stupid that you're wearing a mask or that you don't feel comfortable, like that's not good. And so you need to watch that. Are they living with a roommate? Do they see their elderly parents? These are things that you need to be respectful of, but also have that COVID talk to know like, hey, are you comfortable with meeting or just let's do video calls, right?
Breadcrumbing? I've never heard of that.
Yeah. I don't know what breadcrumbing is. It's very
like when people are like, like breadcrumbs, like they're just texting you enough, like to kind of keep you interested, but then they kind of like disappear. And so they just message and communicate enough to keep you interested.
Yeah.
So whether that be
He's like
Facebook or Instagram, like every 3 days, and then you're like, hey, how's it going? Nothing. And then he might like your profile or comment all of a sudden, and then say, hey, again, 3 or 4 days later. That's like breadcrumbing.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I could say from my perspective, during this pandemic, I learned a lot about myself, my wife, and my children, about what is good and what is not so good, and when I need to go take a walk. So I support that very much.
Oh my god. Since we're gonna focus, I think I'm gonna focus more a little bit on online, just because for those that are watching in Canada as well as Americans, you know, and obviously I feel like the virtual dating space is kind of the replacement for the first date. So, you know, usually first dates aren't that great. I mean, sometimes they're, you know, you're just like, oh, this is great. Maybe I'll see you, maybe I won't. But the goal I always tell people is to get the second date. The second date is like the real date. And then by the third date, if it's not happening, then, you know, waste your time. But because everyone is inside kind of a lockdown or a quarantine, what would be your 3 suggestions for people looking to kind of start the online dating process? Where should they go? I know you talked about meetups and some other places, and I feel a lot of people are like, well, I don't know where to meet someone right now. You know.
For sure. Yeah. So where to get started to meet someone, right? So I would say obviously online. So you've got all your like dating apps, right? Whether it's Hinge, Bumble, OkCupid, there's a whole bunch of them. So definitely I would say there are people that I know that are like, I'm just going to wait till the pandemic's over. And I'm like, when is that going to happen? And to be honest, the pandemic has completely changed the dating space.
Yeah.
Like I think they're completely out of touch if they're thinking that you can totally maybe like forget about dating apps. I just think start there. And if anything, it's a good way to continue practicing socializing because some people actually need that kind of practice. So dating apps, there's other online platforms, not just apps. So meetup.com, there's a bunch of Facebook groups that have thousands of members that are really great for that. Obviously, you know, companies like myself, like Toronto Dating Hub, like we're on Eventbrite. So looking up singles and speed dating events are really huge and taking off. And then I would say, you know, your own network. You know, like we talked about professional networks, but your own affiliation. So whether church, where you volunteered, where you went to the gym, whatever hobby. So whether that's dancing or you golfed or played basketball, whatever that is, wherever you took lessons, maybe you did rock climbing. So looking to see if those clubs or places are doing any events or sports team. And if they're not, maybe you should take that up. And it's so easy to start like a Facebook event or a group or a Zoom call, right? And so just start that, and then word of mouth travels, right? Like I had someone's like, Andrea, I didn't know you're single. Can I introduce you to someone? Like you just never know. And you're like, I'm like, sure, why not? And then I would say, this is a funny one, but no joke, it can work. And again, depending on whether you're not in a province lockdown, so maybe it's a little bit better. But sometimes by chance, whether right now it's all about essential travel. So at the grocery store, maybe in a park, maybe in the elevator, and you meet someone cute from your building that you never had a chance to speak to. Or instead of doing like, you know, your Uber Eats, for example, maybe order the food and then go and pick it up. So you might meet someone in line or picking up, you know, when you're picking up your coffee or tea or the takeout, you never know who you might, you know, bump into. And again, I would say not bank on, oh, I'm going to meet the person of my dreams. But I think, again, because people are isolated and Zoom fatigue again, I think we've lost touch of like, how do we socialize? What are pickup lines anymore? And pickup lines aren't just for guys approaching girls. Like it could be the girls. Like, why don't you practice doing that? Like, or when we have our mask on, how do you practice smiling with your eyes, flirting with your eyes, right? So I think it's really great practice to do any of these things, to just practice talking to people, approaching people, and then making friends.
Yeah, that's a wonderful advice. I hope you guys, those that are listening, can take heed of that. I make a joke because normally I'm in Florida, and Florida is just open. Like Florida really didn't lock down. They locked down for like 2 months. And then they're like, forget this, we're just gonna be open. So, and I mean open, I don't mean like nothing is closed. We had the Super Bowl for goodness sake, it was open.
Yeah.
When Tom Brady is drunk, you know, something's happening.
Yes.
But I see a lot of people actually flirting in parking lots because a lot of the condo buildings, people are parking outside. So the only way to socialize a lot of times without a mask and you're kind of distant is people are flirting while people are like throwing out garbage, going to the recycling bin. I'm like, oh, okay, like this sounds good. So you never know.
I just thought of one. If you have a pet and it's like, I mean, in Toronto it's still snowing, but still you gotta walk your pet. Maybe it's like, you know, use your pet and like go walk around, or maybe, you know, when some people are going on their like pet walking times breaks, and again, it's all about socializing. You never know who you meet or who they might know.
Yeah, definitely. That's great advice. So now I'm going to hand it over to my lovely co-host, Jem. Ask some, you know, we did some of the love questions, some of the dating questions. Now we're going to get into, you know, money, because everybody loves money.
Well, you know, I wanted to transition into actually one thing you mentioned earlier about your campaigns that were successful. And then I saw on one of your bios that, I mean, you've done a ton of these. I would love to hear, you know, kind of what you do to make sure and ensure that your campaigns are successful. Do you have a systematic approach to this on how you market yourself out, how you run this, and how you get people to interact?
Yeah, and it's definitely been different to transition from working for a big marketing agency to doing things on my own. But for my dating business, I mentioned like I do surveys and polls. So like I just planned 4 events for next month, including a St. Patty's Day happy hour, because and actually I had tried to message the top 6 Irish pubs in Toronto to say, hey, would you like to partner or sponsor? Obviously, all of them are closed. But again, this is back to pivoting. And I saw an opportunity like, you know, a month out, and I'm already planning for it, looking for drink sponsors or something else. But anyways, so I go over past event feedback to see what worked, what didn't work for what my attendees have said. And then I start to think of the theme. So like I said, I thought of St. Patty's Day happy hour. I also have a webinar coming out for how to improve dating during COVID, which is a hot topic. Yeah. So I think of like a theme, and then I already polled in the past, what is the best date and time to host an event? So because, for example, I noticed that my attendees love the 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. period during a weeknight over the weekend. Yeah. So scheduling at a, you know, obviously you want to schedule at a time when people can actually make it. And then obviously every time I have an event or I make the event page, you want to have a good picture and obviously a great hook for why they should come out, right? Learn about the tips for how to increase your chances of meeting your match, right? By doing X, whatever, or having an off. My last event had, I had a drink sponsor that sponsored, like delivered cocktails to all my attendees if they bought the ticket by a certain date. So happy hour drinks were complimentary from my drink sponsor, which was amazing. And then, of course, when it comes to the actual event, to ensure I have, you know, well, great host, check, I have that. And then great icebreakers and activities. Like I said in the Anti-V Day, I came up with a custom game that I partnered with a local business who does like an app, kind of like if you played like House Party or Kahoot and things, like you can poll. So I made a custom Anti-V Day game, which asks questions like, you know, that game, that this or that. So I did a game and there was a whole leaderboard. So it asked questions like, would you rather be cheated on or be the cheater? Would you rather emotional cheating or physical cheating? And it creates like, oh my God, like how do I choose? And it just got everyone talking. And then I break them into breakout rooms to actually start discussing those topics. Or can you marry someone where the sex isn't good? So I come up with really intriguing questions.
No. Answer that one. Hell no.
Right? And so people have these really great conversations. And again, going back to one of your questions earlier, Gwen, about, you know, how to have a good virtual date, because people are boring these days, right? They're just like, let's go on a Zoom call. And I'm like, oh, like I just hate hearing that. But again, if you could just focus on being flirty and having these interesting questions, the game changes, right? And you can ask them really serious questions without sounding like you're like, this is an interview and I'm interviewing you for the best candidate. Like you're like, yeah, like what's something sexy that turns you on that isn't sexual or something? Like, you know, you just come up with different things. So that is sort of like my secret sauce for how I get really good events.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, so another question. Let's parlay on that. So when you talk to the local Irish pubs in Toronto, did you have a virtual happy hour, or did you have a face-to-face happy hour? And if it was virtual, did they send drinks to everyone that was on it?
Yeah, so the last one I did, they're all virtual events because I mentioned like we're on a province-wide lockdown, but I didn't let that stop me from doing virtual events. So my sponsor actually was amazing in that because they have reps, and so they, as long as they lived in that like vicinity, they delivered to their door. Like,
Wow.
yeah, so it was great. And so sort of my sort of give back to the sponsor was we did like a, when your Zoom window, like everyone did a cheers holding the drink that they received. And so we sort of did virtual cheers. And then there, my sponsor got a really beautiful photo of everyone sort of holding their drink. Because right now for them, the strategic part of that is that they can't do events right now. So
Right.
they're partnering with other local business like myself that are hosting events. And I have the avenue in the audience. So it's sort of like a win-win for both of us.
Yes, actually, that's awesome. That's really awesome. And one last question for me is when you talk on your dating side of it, or on the business management side of it, relationships and money always come into play. Usually come into play. What are some areas that people have brought up to you, and/or what are tips that you share with them on how to help manage all of that?
To manage relationships.
Any kind of financial question. If someone's dating and they say, "Hey," I know it's different now because it's virtual, but when face to face, you want to make sure that you know who's paying or not, or I'm paying or you're paying and whatnot.
Yeah.
I dig deeper into the investment side and the executive planning side. From where you're coming from, how do you handle that, or what do you even share?
Right. So one of the really, like, I love asking controversial questions at my events. So actually one of the big questions have been who should pay on the first date. And that's always been something super interesting because, and I'm careful to say this because honestly, depending on what age group you're talking to, that answer changes from some, like, I would say the older generation would say, obviously the guy, like literally, like, obviously the guy, there's no other answer. And then you'd ask like more of the younger generation, they're like, no, it's everyone pays for themselves, or it's whoever asked first or like initiate the date should, like, so yeah. It really, so even something like that is completely different and changed depending on who you talk to. Yeah. But I would say some of the tips I give, especially with virtual dating or pandemic dating, is coming up with fun, but fun dates that don't break your bank, right? Like a walk in the park, it doesn't cost anything, or doing something. Because right now it's really about getting to know somebody, so you don't have to worry about like, let's go on a fancy dinner for a first date, where older days maybe that was more expected, but now it's casual, like let's go for a coffee date, right? Where like if you ever get to the point where you're doing, and in coffee dates you can still do the 6 feet apart and wear like masks and sort of somewhat be like apart, but I would say there are so many date ideas that won't break the bank and allow you to be able to get to know someone on a deeper level.
Yeah, that's great. Perfect. Well said. Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Andrea. I hope you guys, those that have watched and are going to be watching on the replay, have learned a lot from everything that she's saying, especially if you're interested in getting back into the groove of virtual dating, as well as if you are in Toronto, make sure to check her out. Andrea, what do you have coming up next for you? I know you said you have a lot of events planned for your company.
Yeah, and actually, I know I am based in Toronto because we're virtual. Like, I've had a few attendees that one was from Maui, one was from Texas. Like, it was so like as long as they know you are talking to Torontonians or like that's fine. But yeah, I have a webinar coming up February 27th about how to improve your dating during COVID. So we talk about how to improve your matches, how do you go from texting in the app to outside of the app, like how to move it off the app, and things like that. So that webinar is on February 27th. March 7th, I have a yoga class for again, it's all virtual, a yoga class for females, because I found that one of my findings for females was they're too shy or too nervous to come out to a singles event on their own. So I wanted to create a space for women to sort of be friends. So this one, you don't have to be single. It's just a yoga class for women. I'm partnering with a local entrepreneur with that one. I have the March 17th, St. Patty's Day happy hour, which will be fun. And I'll have a sponsor to sponsor like a gift of green drinks, which will be nice. And then March 27th is a co-ed fitness class, again, partnering up with another local entrepreneur, but you can work out together with other singles, which will be fun. All virtual, and it's all found on TorontoDatingHub.com.
That is awesome.
Those ideas. Those are amazing events, guys.
Very clever. I like that.
I find it interesting that you said that you have some Americans coming to your events, because at my events, we found that there were Canadians coming. I was like,
awesome.
Yeah, read this. And they're like, we don't care.
Like I said, right? People are hungry to just interact, and the number of people who are willing to try, virtual singles events are smaller than obviously the people on dating apps.
Yeah.
And like I said, there's still those people who are like, I'll just wait till the pandemic's over. You're gonna be.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about those. I was just like, go away. It's like you're gonna be waiting a very long time. I don't know what you're gonna do.
And I don't know about you, Gwen. I find that people who come, honestly, it's not like they're like, I'm after a husband or wife. Like, they're really just there to make friends and make connections. If something happens, bonus. But they're not coming in here like, I'm the next person I meet, like, I'm going to marry them and I'm desperate. Like, it's not that. It's very cool and casual, which is awesome.
Yeah, I've never advertised as you're going to find the love of your life. I mean, we hope that's going to happen. I've seen it done on the other side where it was face-to-face, but I haven't. I mean, the online space is so new, especially for virtual dating. I have not seen that yet. But I don't know, maybe next year, there'll be a bunch of people like, I got married because I met somebody at a Zoom event. Then great. But I do agree with that. You kind of have to go in with an open mind, a kind of open heart. And, if it works, great. It's low investment. It's not like it's costing you like a fancy dinner, at least for the first date. Guys, don't get it twisted. It's going to cost later on. It's not. Always still guys are like, it's only $10. I'm like, yeah, like the second date. But thank you so much for joining us. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, Andrew, this was great. It was a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and vision about where you are. We have, I think I mentioned this last week, we have a webinar on the 23rd to talk about retirement planning, and we're going to share the top 3 reasons that'll prevent you from retiring. If anyone has any questions, message me and I'll send you all the links to get on that Zoom. It's going to be pretty awesome.
Wonderful. You guys have to make sure to reach out to the link that I will put in the replay for Jim's webinar. If you guys are looking to plan your retirement, probably should, because it's important. Yeah. We all want to retire one day. We all can't keep working. And as far as Love Talk, our next event, for those of you that are in the South, which will be Thursday, with our wonderful host Kate. So we are trying to find a bachelor and bachelorette for the rest of the year, and our goal is still to find 100 singles, and we will match them for December 31st. 2021. I can't believe I'm saying that date. That's great. Way too old. But thank you so much again, Andrea. And again, if you guys have any questions, make sure to reach out to her. It's TorontoDatingHub.com. And hopefully we'll be able to do something. Maybe we'll do like an American, USA, Canadian.
I think we should. That'd be so cool.
My fiance is a little bit French Canadian. I make jokes about this to him all the time. I'm like, we can go to Canada. And he's like, we can't. I'm like, yes, you are. You're French Canadian. He's like 1/8 French Canadian. It's fine. But thank you so much, Andrea.
Thank you for having me, guys. It was really great meeting you.
Bye, guys. We will see you again next time, this time at 8 p.m. next Tuesday.
Excellent.
Bye. Bye.